I remember being really feminine. The world terrified me. I had insanely timid energy. I would never take any sort of responsibility. I would always let other people lead me in directions. I had very little self-autonomy. I didn't have any sort of purpose beyond just being in the present moment. I didn't think ahead. I would complain a lot, and I had very little handle on my emotions. My emotions would run me. My emotions would determine whether I would get out of bed and do some work or if I would stay there. But then there was a point in my life where I realized just how insanely feminine I was. I went to Amsterdam for a weekend along with my friend and client Hamza and a few of the other guys who were a part of our team. And it was on this trip where I truly realized how actually feminine I was and how much it was holding me back into becoming the man that I wanted to become. It was my first time abroad and I was terrified. I'd very recently just overcame immense crippling social anxiety and depression. And it was during this trip where I realized how little responsibility I took over really anything. I'll give you one example. And it might seem like a silly example, but if you behave like this in every single micro decision and micro interaction that you have, it really becomes a massive snowball of just feminine energy. The example I'll give is me, Hamza, and our other friend Chris, okay? We're trying to decide where we're gonna go for the day. I took zero initiative in deciding where we should go. Chris was on his phone on Google Maps trying to find something to do. Hamza was brainstorming some shit we could do. I just stood there and waited for the masculine men to make the decision. Again, it seems like a silly example, but it was on this trip where I really self-analyzed a lot of these small decisions that I make on my day-to-day basis. And ultimately, it's these small decisions that I made constantly, which made me a very feminine man. On this trip, it became so obvious to me that I had a very feminine frame. And from that point on, I pledged myself to consciously start to become more masculine. Despite what mainstream media may tell me, you know, toxic masculinity, bro, no, masculinity is bad, you're all rapists, sexist, pigs, whatever the fuck they say, right? I was certainly a massive victim of that. As someone who was chronically online, I was indoctrinated into certain ways of thinking. Being a man is not okay. No, you can't flirt with women. It's very subtle things that they dig out of you, which completely takes your control away from you and your imperative to be a man. And I was definitely a victim of that. So despite that shit, I decided from this point on, after my Amsterdam trip, fuck this. I'm now painfully aware of how feminine I can be, and I'm going to do everything to combat that. And then 2 weeks later after the Amsterdam trip was my first trip to Thailand. So I went from never going abroad ever to doing a weekend in Amsterdam, and then 2 weeks later across the fucking world to Thailand, which is an entirely different country. And let me tell you, for the first 5 days of me being in Thailand, I was a bitch to be around. I was absolutely terrified. I wanted to take a plane ride home. That's how anxious I was. It was a massive, massive culture shock for me. And the amount of responsibility and also autonomy that I suddenly had was very, very challenging for me. And I was complaining, bitching, moaning, all the time. I actually apologized to Hamza at one point because I was aware of how much of a bitch I was being, but I couldn't fucking help myself. But my God, this Thailand trip completely changed my trajectory in life. While I was in Thailand, I made some incredible friends. I challenged myself every single day because before this, I was a very, very sheltered mommy's boy. My mom took far too much care for me, okay? I didn't have my dad in the household. I was very, very mothered, and this is an absolute plague amongst young men. Women are fantastic, but getting raised by a single mom is by far one of the biggest detriments you can ever have in life as a man. You need the masculine counterbalance to your mother's feminine energy, okay? Because your mom is just gonna try and keep you as safe as humanly possible. And that's the worst thing you could possibly have for a young man. But they say that the experience that you gain when you are abroad versus in your home country is tripled. And to that, I can absolutely agree. I grew in an insanely rapid amount of time when I was in Thailand for the first time. There was one day trip I went out on, and there's actually a video of this on my channel still. But essentially, we climbed up a waterfall through the tourist path. And then at the top of the waterfall, I somewhat jokingly got baptized by Hamza and Jack, my friends, into becoming a man, which is quite a symbolic moment for me, even though it was a bit silly. But then after we climbed up the waterfall, we decided to actually climb down the waterfall. Not the tourist path, but like down the fucking waterfall. And I say we decided. I didn't actually decide to do this. I didn't want to do this. To me, it was unnecessary risk, and I was absolutely petrified the entire time doing it. I did do it, but I didn't have any sense of actual accomplishment after I did it. And that's because I didn't decide to do it. I actually got sort of peer pressured into doing it. I was once again just a feather in the wind, just doing as my friends were doing, which is a bit of a shame, but I did do it anyway. And I got a lot of growth from doing just that. And I also learned that if I want to accomplish things, if I want to feel achievement, then I have to choose to do these things rather than get sort of pushed into it. But that was a very important day in my growth as well. Made a lot of incredible friends, made a lot of incredible connections. The entire trip, I was just constantly pushing myself out of my comfort zone. When it came to women as well, having my own routine, having my own responsibilities, this trip made me far more of a man, despite it starting out with me being petrified. If we fast forward to now, I can well and truly say that I have completely 180'd my feminine tendencies, and I am now a far more masculine man. And there was a point during my Thailand trip where I was starting to get a bit nihilistic with my feminine traits. I started to believe that perhaps this is just how I am and that I can't change it. I'm just a bit of a feminine dude and it is what it is. But I decided to not even entertain those thoughts because all they did was disempower me, and I powered on through what I was doing anyway. And I'm really glad I did that because I can safely say I've completely 180'd this dynamic. I'm completely comfortable in my own skin. I have an incredibly strong masculine frame. I have the respect of my friends, my family, my girlfriend, and I find a lot of power in saying no as well. I'm no longer the guy who would just climb down a waterfall because his friends are doing it, even though I don't want to do it. And there is a lot of power in saying no. And sometimes the most masculine thing you can do in those scenarios where you're not comfortable and you don't want to do it is say fucking no. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not a feather in the wind anymore. And I can't stress to you enough how big of a difference this has made to my self-esteem and my self-image. I also unapologetically do not associate with people who do not align with who I am and my mission. Before, I'd be very conscious of other people's feelings and like, oh, but they're good people, but like, you know, they do drag me down a little bit, but they're just friends, and none of that anymore. If we don't align, I unapologetically do not associate with them. This also makes an enormous difference to your self-esteem, because if you're hanging around with people who make fun of you, but they're good friends, you're never going to move beyond this point, and you're trying to do this, but they're going to drag you straight back down here, okay? I've taken complete and utter control and responsibility over my entire life. There was a point in time where I believed that I would never be able to get past my crippling anxiety and my crippling depression, and I had to learn to live with it. And this is once again me taking the control and the responsibility out of my own hands and placing it upon other circumstances which I have no control over. That is feminine. And it also wasn't true, because since taking control over that, I have completely destroyed all of my mental ailments. I have zero anxiety. I'm actually far slicker than the average man socially now, and I have no depression. I am happy, I'm fulfilled, I live an amazing life. I've also built discipline. I do the things that I don't necessarily want to do every single day. I make the harder micro decisions rather than the easier ones. I get out of bed and do my work rather than staying in bed and scrolling on Instagram. I get my ass into the gym even though my body hurts. I've taken monetary responsibility over myself, my loved ones. I'm self-reliant. I provide income to my family, and I also provide for my girlfriend. I have complete and utter self-autonomy. I can do whatever I want, wherever I want. And this is all down to the fact that I became a more masculine man. Literally, all of your problems can be solved by simply just becoming a more masculine version of yourself. Because think about it. If you don't take any responsibility over your own life and your own circumstances, and you hand it off to something else, it's the government's fault, it's my parents' fault, then you have no control to change your situation. But by taking full responsibility, you then have the power to change. I also have immense access to the dating market. I have no problems with women anymore. Any environment I go into, I get the attraction of women. I can speak to beautiful women, no problem. Obviously, I have a girlfriend, but having the options is very important for a man's self-esteem and actually the maintenance of his relationship. Because if I get one-itis with my girlfriend and I think, oh my God, she's the only girl in the world who would ever love me, that relationship's gonna fall apart very, very quickly. None of this stuff snapped into place overnight, okay? This was a 1.5, 2 year adventure, but it started with me literally acknowledging and self-analyzing my feminine traits. Am I a follower? Do I not take responsibility? Do I not have control over my own life? Do I have no frame? Do I just let people walk all over me all the time? Do I have discipline? All of this stuff started by me literally just self-analyzing and making the pledge to slowly change. If you want to start seeing results similar to this, I suggest to you that you make that same pledge. Self-analyze. Why do you behave in certain ways? Is you lying in bed and scrolling Instagram reels a characteristic trait which a masculine version of yourself would have? Is you hanging around in Discord servers, hanging out with a bunch of gamers, once again, a trait of a highly masculine man? No, it's not. Make those small adjustments every single day and watch as your entire fucking life begins to make a lot more sense. I promise you, bro. This is a big fucking deal. Your dating life, your work life, your relationships, everything will transform once you become a more masculine man. If you want to learn how to make money online from the comfort of your home and join over 450 of my students who are doing exactly that, click the first link in the description right now. Take care, boys.